Hello, my enforcers of all things elite. Welcome to the Duality of Wrestling podcast. I'm Christian. Thanks so much for checking out the channel. Appreciate you all being here. So, we have Dynamite coming up very shortly from Baltimore on August 19th. I'm recording this the day beforehand, so we're going to do a quick preview of Dynamite. I'm going to keep this at one part to keep it brief, but honestly, I will be straight. I'm going to struggle doing that because we actually have way more announced for Dynamite this week than is typical of AEW. Usually they announce 3, maybe 4 matches leading into it, but right now, including segments that have got announced, we have 6. We have 6 items announced for AEW Dynamite this week. That is very unlike AEW over 24 hours in advance of the show. So again, I will probably struggle to keep this at one part, but I am determined to do it. So let's jump in. I'm not going to belabor some of the things I said on the recap and of the first round and preview of the second round of the Continental Challenge Cup. I've spent a good bit of time on that. By all means, go watch that video. I go over what the matches are for Dynamite and Collision this week in the quarterfinals. 2 of them are taking place on Dynamite here, so I'm going to touch on them at a very high level. First off, we have Nigel McGuinness versus Hechicero. So Nigel McGuinness sustained an injury, I believe, to his foot during his match in the first round against Katsuyori Shibata. So this match is a little bit in question. I'm not sure if Tony Khan will announce a replacement. I almost find it a little bit unlikely unless Nigel shows up to the arena in more pain than he can deal with, because they could have just announced that at the outset. They already acknowledged on TV that Nigel is hurt. They could have swapped him out for replacement the same way they did in the Women's Owen Hart tournament multiple times. So I don't think there would be an issue doing so off TV. And the fact that they didn't do it and announced Nigel anyway makes me think that this match is going to go on. And barring an injury angle, I do expect Nigel to advance. Wembley is in his home country. I think he at the very least makes it to Scotland for the semifinals. Hechicero, I don't want to say got a surprise win, but he got more of like a 50-50 toss-up kind of win over Brian Cage. I could have seen that match going either way. I totally understand the decision to put the win on the CMLL World Champion in Hechicero, but I don't think he gets past Nigel McGuinness barring injury. Nigel is going to be the hometown favorite, or at least the home country, home kingdom, whatever we want to call what Scotland is to the UK. But he's gonna be the European favorite. We'll call it that. So I do expect Nigel to win and advance to Scotland as long as his health permits him to do so. Then we have a match that very much surprised me when it was announced. We have Jon Moxley, the current Continental Champion, taking on the leader of the Bang Bang Gang in Jay White in the quarterfinals. I'm very shocked by this. I really thought this was going to be the finals match in this Challenge Cup. So the fact that we're getting it in the quarters is very surprising to me. But it also, to me, means that there's no way Jon Moxley loses this match. If Moxley were to lose, it would have either happened in the first round to really make this a chaotic tournament, and the fact that we would have seen a new champion, the specter of that hanging over the entire bracket the whole way through the progression of the tournament. We're not going to do it, or we're not going to do it in this quarterfinals here before we even get to the Scotland semifinals or the Wembley finals. So I don't see any way that Moxley loses here. We've still got the ongoing Dogs, Death Riders, Bang Bang Gang beef. This plays into that storyline nicely. The match is going to be a lot of fun, and I think it could set up for a good feud down the road between these two. I would not be surprised if we get a rematch later on, maybe an All Out in Chicago. That would be a lot of fun, but I don't think that Jay White has any chance to take the belt off of Moxley here and advance in the tournament, or at least put the belt up for grabs for the rest of the field. So I'm going to say that Jon Moxley wins and wins comfortably here. So that would allow Nigel, barring health, and Moxley to advance to the next round. Again, please check out my recap of round 1 and preview of round 2 all in one video up on the channel as well. I go into much more detail about my thoughts on the matches. So next up, we have a sit-down segment between Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay, where they will be interviewed with Renee Paquette. And frankly, this is just going to be used as a vehicle to advance the tensions a bit more. I'm not super invested in the sit-down interview format. We've already done it recently. We did it last week with the Bucks and Cope and Cage. We've done it a few times leading up to, differing matches in recent months. I don't think there's enough differentiation here for it to really interest me. Plus, let's be fair, promos and interviews are not the strong suit of Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay. So I'm not super invested in this. I love the feud. The feud's been great, and I'm a little bit intrigued to see what route they go with it. But we've already seen the physicality happen back at Redemption, where Kenny kind of blindsided Will Ospreay. Then last week Kenny helps Will against the Don Callis family. But both acknowledge that won't happen again. Help is not going to be offered nor accepted if it occurs again. So I guess I'm curious to see how they build on that, but we're only, 2 weeks away from the pay-per-view, so there's not a lot more build that can happen that hasn't already happened. So I'm thinking it's just another way to keep the feud on TV, to build the tension a little bit more, but I don't expect anything monumental of this, so I'm not exactly getting my hopes up for anything earth-shattering coming from this interview segment. Then we have the first of two trios matches where El Clone and Mark Davis and Jake Doyle of the Don Callis family are going to take on Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. So Kenny's going to be in two segments on this show. The Bucks and Omega, the Elite Reform, taking on the Don Callis family. I'm starting to wonder if we're getting a little too much Don Callis presence on TV as a whole. His fingerprints are in so many things right now. You have him all over the international title feud between Okada, Takeshita, and Kyle Fletcher. You have him involved in this match. You have him involved in a tertiary way in Kenny versus Will. You have him involved in the next match on this show, which is also a trios match. You have him involved in the TNT Championship match with Kevin Knight versus Darby Allin. I think we're just at a point we have too many Don Callis family members, and we need to start parsing it down a bit so that we don't get overexposed to the Don Callis family. We don't want this to end up in NWO black and white territory where you have a third of the freaking roster on this one faction, and it waters it down and makes it, not easy for us to care about anybody, especially considering there are so many talented performers in the Don Callis family. Just in this match alone, Jake Doyle has been very improved and is very imposing coming out of his injury. El Clone is fantastic and probably one of the most underrated talents on the roster. And Mark Davis has arguably been AEW's most improved wrestler over the last 12 to 18 months. So just those guys in this match, deserve highlighting on their own. And I would just like to see maybe a little bit less Don Callis presence, because we can't have one guy overshadowing the whole show. It doesn't work. We need to be able to care about things on multiple levels. So honestly, if there was something I would do, I would parse Callis out of at least two of the storylines he's in. And frankly, the Don Callis family needs to enter the women's division. There's talent there that could use representation. Sheeta could potentially be a good fit. Persephone could be a great fit. There are even the Divine Dominion could be excellent fits, especially after they lose the tag team champions, as I expect them to at All In against the Brawling Birds. So there are definitely spots open where we should be having a bit more of that integration into the women's division. Having it only be in the men's division feels a little weird to me in 2026, especially from a manager who is as all-encompassing and all-knowing, apparently, as the invisible hand Don Callis is supposed to be. It doesn't make sense for him to be out entirely on the women's division and yet have his hands in so many storylines in the men's division. So that's my aside. I'd like to see a little bit less, maybe a little bit less Callis, but also a little bit more diversified Callis, if that makes sense. So back to this match in general, it's going to be super fun. All of these guys in the ring can go and go hard. The Elite are always a treat getting to watch together. I did not mean to rhyme that, but it just happened. Let's just roll with it. Clone, Davis, and Doyle are wonderful. Clone and Davis especially are two of my, I would say Davis was an underrated favorite before, but everybody's jumped on the Mark Davis train now. Everybody knows how good that man is and how, greatly he's improved. El Clone, still underrated favorite. Guy is fantastic in the ring. He hasn't had much to do because he has had visa travel issues in being able to work in the US, but also the guy he was scheduled for a significant program with, Hologram, has been injured for quite some time. So he's kind of been treading water a little bit, but he is a fantastic in-ring talent. Getting to see him on TV is always a good thing. This is going to be such a fun match. I truly don't care who wins. I assume it's the Elite, unless Ospreay or Christian and Cope get involved, but this was going to be a fun match. Another Don Callis family trios match. Starting to see a theme here. We have Brian Cage, Lance Archer, and Rocky Romero taking on Will Ospreay, Francisco Akira, and Henare of United Empire. So we have a little bit of a reunited United Empire here. The specter of Callum Newman looms large in this match because, as Will mentioned in his sort of backstage vignette, he is good with most of the rest of United Empire, but Newman and him are a little bit on the outs. Newman doesn't feel good about where things are right now. So it's very, very possible that Newman could make an unpleasant presence known in this match in some way. I don't think he attacks Ospreay by any stretch, but I think there could be some more character development there. And I wouldn't be surprised down the road to see us get a TV feud between Ospreay and Newman going forward. So we're a bit too far from Forbidden Door to have that to be a Forbidden Door match. I do think we could be a TV program or even potentially on a show like Wrestle Dream, Full Gear, maybe even World's End. So I think we're going to get some kind of mini program with Ospreay and Callum Newman. I don't know if we're going to get it now because I don't know if they want to overshadow Ospreay versus Omega, but they've been known to run multiple stories of differing lengths before. Wouldn't shock me if they did something similar here. And then lastly, the final match announced for Dynamite this week is the TBS Championship 4-Way. We're getting Chris Statlander, Persephone, and Hikaru Shida will be challenging champion Maya World for that title. This could go any number of ways. A 4-way match means there is an increased likelihood that the champion loses in a manner that keeps them strong, but means they don't have to necessarily take the fall to lose their championship. And that could, again, like I said, theoretically keep them strong. So any of these competitors, to me, probably besides Statlander, could take the fall here realistically. And I'm not even sure it's unrealistic for Stat to take the fall because you have Persephone and Shida who have teamed up already. They could easily align in this matchup a little bit to beat down on Stat and allow her to be more vulnerable than she would be in your typical every woman for themselves 4-way match. Stat is the most imposing competitor in this match. I don't want to say she has the best resume because Hikaru Shida is a 3-time women's champion. I feel like we all forget that. Of the competitors in this match, only Shida and Stat have won both the TBS Championship and the AEW Women's World Championship. They are obviously, from a resume standpoint, the strongest competitors in this field. But neither of them hold championships at the moment, whereas Maya World is your current TBS champion. And if you have listened to me at all, you know that AEW is very focused on pushing Maya World as the new star of the women's division. I'm not going to sit here and say she's the face of the women's division by any stretch, but she is somebody they are working hard to elevate. You saw it last week by Statlander, multiple times saying she deserved the championship and clapping for her to try to get the audience on board. You saw Thunder Rosa even jump back into Maya's entrance to try to get Maya a pop when one wasn't happening. AEW is focused on making Maya World be their fetch that happens. Whether it is fetch or whether it does happen is still, up in the air. They're doing their damnedest, though, to make it happen. But then the other champion in this match is the CMLL Women's World Champion, Persephone. And Persephone has been booked pretty well of late. She has shown off a heel side to her character that's been very refreshing. She plays that role very well. Her feud with Statlander has been interesting and allowed both of them to sort of stretch their wings a bit when both, especially Statlander, was floundering a good bit after she lost the AEW Women's World Championship and was unsuccessful in regaining it. She had her team/feud with Shida that was interesting in the undercard, and now she's moved on to Persephone. So I'm interested to see who emerges from this matchup. I'm loath to say that Persephone will win. If this was being done at Grand Slam Mexico, I think Persephone wins for sure. I think she would have gotten the big home crowd reaction of winning in Arena Mexico. So if this was at a different venue, I'd probably call for Persephone winning. To me, Shida doesn't make sense. She was the one that was the recent championship holder that lost the belt to Maya at Redemption. If they're going to put the belt back on Shida, they should have never taken it off her in the first place. So losing it back to Shida doesn't make sense to me. Statlander is possible, but I don't think so. I think Statlander is serving as a support role right now for Maya. I think she's sort of acting as Maya's heavy and giving her a bit more credibility in taking on a 3-time women's world champion in Shida and a current CMLL women's champion in Persephone. Maya doesn't have their resume despite being the only active AEW champion of the group. But again, like I said, AEW is trying very hard to make Maya happen, and I think Stat is acting in that kind of support elevation capacity for Maya. So I don't think Stat is going to take the belt here either, because that would be counterproductive to what AEW wants to do. So it leaves Persephone and Maya World. And of of those two options, I think Maya World retaining makes the most sense. I think she is going to walk into All In as the champion. I'm not sure that she retains that. I'm not sure exactly even what program they're going to do at All In because we're only 2 weeks away from All In. And right now, there's no cohesive program or no easily predictable feud and match for that pay per view for Maya World or for the TBS Championship as a whole. This four-way would have made more sense to do at the pay-per-view because this is what's being built towards. The only other wrinkle I could see being added is doing a scramble match with Thunder Rosa added in because she's been on the sidelines of this feud as well. So I could see that happening. But right now, all signs to me point to Maya World returning, despite the fact that, again, champions in a four-way match or multi-person match usually have a higher likelihood of losing their title because they don't have to be pinned or submitted to lose that championship. So I'm going to say Maya World retains here and is going to walk into All In to do whatever the hell she's going to do with the TBS championship because honestly, I don't know. That's what we've got for Dynamite this week. We have 2 Continental Cup Challenge matches. We've got a championship match. We've got the 2 trios matches, and we've got Omega Ospreay as a sit down. And a quick look ahead to Collision. We've also got the final 2 matches in the quarterfinals for the Continental Challenge Cup. We have Eddie Kingston renewing his rivalry with Claudio Castagnoli. That's going to be a must watch. Very vitriolic feud that I can't wait to see bubble up to the surface again. And then we've got the conglomeration going at each other once again as Orange Cassidy faces off against Kyle O'Reilly. So those are going to be fun matches to watch. But again, like I said, Baltimore Dynamite this week, a lot more is advanced announced than usual. I'm not typically prepared for more than 3 or 4 things. I've gotten very used to being able to only preview 3 or 4 things. I'm actually very happy that AEW is doing this, though. I love the fact that they're giving us more of the show in advance as more of a reason to make sure we tune in and watch, or set DVRs, or make sure we set our streaming reminders, or whatever platform you watch on. Giving us more of a reason to watch is always a good thing. So I think this is a good decision on AEW's part, and I hope they continue it going forward. Let me know in the comments what you think. What are you anticipating for the show? Or what do you think of the TBS Championship match? Do you see Maya retaining? Do you see any of the other 3 women taking the belt home? Or do you see a schmaz finish here? Give me a shout in the comments. Let me know what you think. As always, I'm Christian with Duality of Wrestling. I will be back following Dynamite with my review. But for right now, I will see you in the next one, guys.